Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe and explore. Flames licked across ceramic shielding as the capsule tore downward, sky peeled open in strips above low cloud. Somewhere beneath that rupture, a landing grid blinked across a salt flat turned amber under dusk. Silence built before impact. Then 3 sharp bursts. Dust rose. Nothing moved. Metal settled into its own weight. Wind curled around carbon struts. A hatch hissed open, swinging out just enough to let in the air, dry, faint with scorched resin, old vacuum grease, and the ghosts of a million exit burns. Boots touched soil first, then a gloved hand. Pressure was fine. No alarms. A stretcher remained unused. Voices crackled across radios, sterilized by protocol. Jargon passed like traffic, nobody raising questions. Her eyes remained unreadable behind polarized visors, not that anyone tried. One medtech logged baseline vitals. One signed off diagnostic. Nothing flagged. External hull showed minor abrasions, thermal shielding within tolerance. Autopilot had compensated for drift. A second crew swabbed her cuffs, scraped the dust from her boots, logged microbial count. All standard. Time of landing marked. Log closed. The ride back felt longer than ascent. Lights buzzed above as if remembering something, flickering at the edges without ever committing to dark. Nobody spoke on the transport. No one noticed the way her right hand remained clenched the entire ride, nails carved faint crescents into the skin, like she was holding onto something too tightly remembered. Arrival at medical intake came without announcement. One nurse greeted with a clipboard smile, motioned toward the scanner. A beep passed through her spine. Retinal check followed. No deviation. Respiration normal. Muscle tone higher than baseline. Stress flagged as mild. She didn't ask what that meant. In the quarters assigned for decompression, there was toothpaste in a paper cup, a folded towel, a wrapped bar of soap. No one had unwrapped the linens. Lights buzzed here too, softer, reluctant. The vent in the far corner ticked like a throat clearing. Clothes shed onto the floor tile. Pale skin caught the blue wash of LED overhead. She stepped into the shower without turning the water on, stood there, naked under nothing, breath slow but uneven. For a moment she stared at the drain, at the way the dust on her ankles curled away in damp gray spirals. Fingers moved to her side. Pause. A frown carved across her face as fingertips brushed along something that wasn't there yesterday. A line. About 9 inches, curving under the ribs. Pink, closed, too clean. Surgical. No inflammation, no bruising. Not fresh, but recent. A cut made with knowledge of anatomy. A cut made to save something. A cut not recorded. She pressed into it, expecting pain. Nothing. Palm flattened over it. Breathing deepened, not from fear, something colder. Something that sat just below reason. She stepped away from the tile and walked to the mirror. Fogged slightly from the heat she hadn't turned on. Reflected back. Skin, bone, eyes that weren't entirely sure of their own timeline. No accidents occurred on mission. She knew this. Knew the order of every checklist, every maneuver, every silence. Nothing failed. No breach. No debris. She came home clean. But there it was. Healed from an injury that never happened. Matching no event she lived. Water finally hissed from the showerhead, unprompted. Cold. She stepped back in anyway. 2 mornings later, a lab tech keyed in a standard post-mission pathology request. Muscle tissue, blood markers, dermal scans. Routine processing before archival. One sample caught in review. Nothing dramatic, nothing that shouted for attention. A clotting anomaly, minor. Slight protein denaturation. A flag pulsed quietly beside the file. Post-trauma residue inconsistent with mission logs. She sat upright under hospital fluorescence, gown loose against collarbone, knees pulled close under coarse blanket. A physician tapped results into a console, eyes narrowing with a focus more mechanical than concerned. Scar tissue behaved oddly. Cell turnover too fast for normal healing. No sign of inflammation, but vascular constriction matched wound profiles more common in combat surgery. Someone asked whether she'd sustained abdominal trauma in childhood. She said no. No accident, no operation, no procedure. Pediatric file confirmed it. No scars listed. No incisions logged. One nurse suggested an allergic reaction to adhesive. Another mentioned hormone flux under stress. Both suggestions discarded by hour's end. By late afternoon, her blood had been run through a secondary screening. Isotopic ratios shifted out of known terrestrial patterns. Mitochondrial degradation in the liver cells, subtle but misaligned. Too much calcium in the surrounding scar band. Cellular arrangement suggested sutures had once been present, yet no dissolving thread remained. The lab didn't raise an alarm. They annotated the inconsistency, filed it for review, assigned it a timestamp and moved on. One floor below, inside the biometrics division, a junior analyst with a habit of looking too hard at minor errors caught something strange in the sequencing code. A name embedded in metadata not tied to any recent scan. A project header labeled LYS1. Request history showed no access in 6 years. Record classified, status marked as archived due to non-deployment. He pulled it anyway. The archived file opened on a gray screen with static margins. No audio. No visual logs. Just personnel lists, crew rotations, launch simulations. Last recorded update ended with a notation. Mission formally cancelled. Site deconstructed. No survivors. Except one entry. Crew position, specialist. Name matched the one on the screen he'd been reviewing all morning. DNA sequence overlaid with a different timestamp, different mission ID, same genotype. 100% match. A version of the woman upstairs had been registered for launch 6 years ago. A flight that never left. A station that was never built. A file that should have been sealed behind 3 levels of clearance. But the DNA didn't lie. He sat still, fingers paused above keys, throat dry. Somewhere in that room, the overhead vents sighed like lungs resetting. The cursor blinked. He printed the sheet anyway. An hour later, the pathology wing requested a second scan. Not for confirmation, but clarity. Scar suture depth didn't match civilian template. Incision pattern matched trauma surgeons trained in orbital response field. A code printed in faded ink along the lower margin of the scan. Foreign object removed, 7 cm depth, lateral right quadrant, entry by pressure breach. The date below it read 5 years earlier than today. No report explained how it got there. No mission listed such an injury. No record existed of her ever leaving Earth prior to the current assignment. But the tissue told a different story. A story with fingerprints in places no one had touched. A story with no beginning, only the mark it left behind. Keys clicked against the glass table in an uneven rhythm. Code hung beside the door. No sound came from the hallway. The apartment held its breath in corners where memory once felt sharper. Toothbrush rested in the wrong cup. One with green bristles, not blue. Purchase history showed blue. The receipt lay folded in the kitchen drawer beneath unopened letters, time-stamped 6 weeks prior. Her name spelled correctly, barcode intact. Nothing wrong, except the bristles. Outside, the neighbor waved. Same man, same beard, same wave. But the dog trotting beside him no longer had the wiry coat she remembered brushing her leg every morning by the stairwell. This one barked. Shorter tail. Spotted. Bark too sharp. The original dog never made a sound. Inside the study, a photo leaned against the back shelf, caught behind a stack of books. Graduation robe draped over narrow shoulders, smile too wide, awkward as always. Faculty members flanking her in crisp academic robes. 4 of them. One unfamiliar. Face thin, angular, chin with a notch missing. The man held a plaque with a seal she didn't recognize. Printed date below matched her memory. The name did not. She took the photo out, turned it over, checked for smudges. Paper clean, edges intact. No signs of tampering. Yet the man in the image had never taught a course at her university. Not once. She recited her old schedule aloud. His name didn't belong. Later, a call came from her sister. Casual, warm, distant in the way family grows when divided by years and orbit. Laughter floated through as they talked about childhood games, arguments over bunk beds, a broken window neither admitted to. Midway through the call, her sister paused. "You're not still sore from the balcony fall, are you? You used to tell everyone that scar made you invincible." Silence hung between them. She asked what balcony. The answer came without hesitation. Third floor, red tiles, summer heatwave. Cracked ribs, bruised spine, stitches along the ribs. Her sister laughed again, called it the story of her invincibility. She ended the call without replying. The voice recorder bought that evening sat heavy in her palm. Simple controls. No features. Just record and play. She pressed the red circle, held it to her mouth, waited. First night's entry. Name, date, address, known fact. Pain under ribs described, weather logged, a note about the bristles. She whispered the name of the professor she remembered, followed by the name on the photograph. Each night after that, another entry. Comparisons. Contradictions. Clock hands photographed at bedtime. Brand labels checked against online stores. Shampoo no longer foamed the way it used to. Bread from the corner store tasted unfamiliar, crust too soft, logo slightly skewed. She began asking strangers for directions she already knew. Took wrong turns on purpose to test her own corrections. Road names felt off by one letter. Street lights blinked in patterns she couldn't quite track. Car horns longer, sharper. She dreamt of stone corridors beneath metal ceilings, blood soaking into tile she didn't recognize. Woke up with hands clenched so tight they left bruises on her thighs. Morning light arrived slower than it used to. Or her perception slowed. She didn't know which. The voice on the recorder began to sound unfamiliar. Her own cadence, slightly altered. Inflection too low. Pacing wrong. One night, she rewound to an entry made the week before. Spoke the same phrase beside it in real time. Two versions didn't match. One whispered. One didn't. Thin envelopes never arrived from internal op. No one sent paper anymore. Not for years. But there it was. Creased once, sealed with adhesive too dry for comfort, slid under the door without timestamp or sender. No postmark. No trace. Inside, nothing handwritten. Just coordinate. A file name. A 6-digit clearance code with the final number smudged. Each stroke printed in courier type, too precise, as if never touched by human hands. The file name led to a server buried beneath obsolete project archive. Cold, old code, static frames, document headers without logos. Retrieval required a console not logged into for months. Access requested. Password granted. Files unzipped into a folder titled with a word last heard in debriefing simulations. Lysothea. 38 pages. No visuals. No official insignia. First page listed 4 crew assignment. Technical officers. Flight engineer. Mission commander. The name sat in third position, not bolded, not highlighted, just there. Spelled without error. Identification string matched personnel file used last week. Signature at the bottom belonged to the same hand that signed off on the return diagnostic. Mission profile mirrored the most recent deployment. Flight trajectory. Timing window. Vessel structure. Life support parameters. Fuel allotments. Each value matched within decimals. The only inconsistency. Date of launch. 6 years prior. The launch never happened. Not officially. Not according to public records. The module referenced in the specs was never built. The pad used no longer existed. The engineer listed had died 2 years before construction even began. She scrolled through line items without blinking. Biosignature codes for each crew member logged and cross-referenced. Her genetic tag sat against a time point preceding the day she was cleared for selection. One foot nudged against the underside of the desk. Breathing held longer between each intake. knuckles against jaw, pressure mounting just beneath the skin. The final page contained a termination clause. Mission cancelled due to funding collapse. No further data. No logs preserved. No flight record kept. Closure date sealed 1 day before her official enrollment into the astronaut training program. The door buzzed 3 times the next morning. No one stood outside. Card access failed that afternoon. Red light blinked across every gate panel she tried. Digital assistant offered no help. Her ID no longer recognized by internal systems. Cafeteria charge refused. Internal messages bounced back unread. At reception, a man in civilian clothes recited a phrase like it had been memorized hours before. Security reshuffle. Standard rotation. Access pending reevaluation. She asked when clearance would return. He smiled without teeth. Requested that she hand over her badge. Not an order. Not quite a suggestion either. Inside the security office, her personnel record displayed with an asterisk. Status: pending clearance review. A document appeared on screen, dated 2 years earlier, bearing her signature in digital ink. Application for withdrawal from deep space assignment citing undisclosed personal concerns. She'd never written it. The text contained references to interviews she'd never attended. Transcripts she never spoke. Evaluations scored by people she'd never met. Her name sat beneath each page without hesitation. Perfect grammar. No sign of forgery. In the hallway outside, 2 employees walked past. One whispered the name of a mission never flown. The other laughed. They didn't look back. The address was handwritten in faded ink across a torn envelope, numbers reversed in the top corner as if meant to be missed. No listing appeared online. No trace in public databases. One map engine located it briefly, then vanished the coordinates on reload. The name still returned nothing. Past the river, down a road paved in fractured cement, beyond a fence marked with rust instead of signs, a structure leaned away from itself. Tin roof bent under its own shadow. Windows blacked out with layers of foil and painted glass. No doorbell. No mailbox. Just a bell without a clapper tied to frayed string. 3 knocks. Silence. 2 more. Lock disengaged without sound. Hinge shifted sideways. A narrow hand gestured once, back turned already. No greeting. Inside, light came from strips taped to ceiling beams. Shelves packed with equipment out of date by decade. CRTs hummed low, unreadable graphs crawling across screens in broken refresh rate. Every surface dusted in copper residue, as though thinking left a residue here. No chair offered. No coat taken. He had grown thin in the years between, thinner than memory allowed. Skin pale, voice more brittle. He moved like sleep was a past luxury. Eyes scanned her without surprise. A line drawn across her side caught his attention. No words exchanged yet, but something in his gaze recognized that shape before she showed it. He asked one question without inflection. What broke? She told him about the scar. The files. The mission. She kept her voice low, like the structure itself was listening. He didn't blink. He didn't interrupt. After she finished, he pointed toward the back room. Past racks of soldered boards and half-assembled machines. A terminal sat in a corner, dark until touched. Power came reluctantly. Interface crude, but live. He typed without glancing down. On screen, a model rotated slowly. Not a diagram. Not quite science. Something closer to a memory drawn by numbers. A body shaped by interference. Not torn. Not damaged. Misaligned. His theory displayed not in words, but distortions. Overlapping outlines, the same figure layered across itself. Multiple timelines failing to cancel each other. Residual trauma not stored in consciousness, but pressed into flesh. A scar that didn't belong to one version, but all. He called it axial displacement through inertial bleed. A place where event boundaries thin under extreme proximity. Not in distance, but in recurrence. Trauma looping through collapsed outcomes. pressure from unresolved causality pressing into bodies that survived when they weren't meant to. She asked about the mission, the one that never launched. He nodded once. Said her capsule never crossed the anomaly alone. Said another version had died in its path, split mid-burn, ruptured on approach. That trajectory was scrubbed, hidden, never spoken of. But the wound remained. Somewhere in that silence, a remnant attached itself to a version that lived. He believed the re-entry corridor acted as a relay. Not a tunnel, not a portal, something more intimate. A suture line between existences, thin enough for grief to leak through. Her body, in surviving, became a resting place for another's final moment. She asked if it could be reversed. He looked away. Said the merge had already resolved. Final. Anchored by memory now. Memory that did not belong solely to her. She whispered about the second scar forming. His silence held too long. Said he'd seen it before. Once. In someone else. A man who remembered drowning on land. Who dreamed in a language that never existed. He said the man forgot his own birthday but remembered dying with glass in his throat. That man stopped speaking 2 months later. Disappeared into a corridor no one built. No one looked for him. Because his file was erased before he vanished. The technician asked no questions. Payment came in cash, handed through a narrow slit in reinforced glass. Lab unmarked. No signage. Equipment older than regulation allowed. Nothing connected to an external server. Every cable sealed with tape, coiled like veins across the floor. Electrodes pressed into scalp with too much pressure. Gel cold against skin. No consent forms. No protocol. Just calibration tones through an earpiece, and the hum of a processor trying to interpret a mind that had stopped matching itself. Initial scans came back unreadable. Patterns overlapped. Too many deltas in the frontal lobe. One hemisphere lit with activity while the other dimmed unpredictably. Memory clusters misaligned across regions never meant to share data. Neural paths crossed as if trained by 2 different lives. Visual cortex showed recognition responses for images never seen. Smells triggered recall before introduction. Words in unfamiliar languages identified as native with perfect translation. Audio test prompted tears without reason. The technician watched without expression. Adjusted calibration. Ran it again. Third pass revealed dual engram structures. Not mirrored. Not symmetrical. Contradictory. One embedded deep, born from repetition, habit, aging. The other newly fused, not learned, imposed. Synaptic weight equally distributed. No dominance. No sign of trauma causing it. Just cohabitation without context. She asked what it meant. The reply came quiet, without emphasis. Said she wasn't losing memory. She was holding 2 sets of them. Next morning, the journal left on her table bore a different signature. Same pen. Same angle. Letters shaped correctly, but curvature wrong. A loop in the Y. A hook in the G, pressure applied heavier on the downward stroke. Date written in a format she hadn't used since her teenage years, long abandoned for standardized numerical order. Her own handwriting, almost. Next page written in another variation. Slightly smaller. Slightly right-leaning. Margins too tight. Letter spacing inconsistent. Something tried to mimic her voice through the lines but missed by small degrees. Enough to be noticed. Enough to avoid denial. Over the next 4 days, she wrote once each night. Same pen. Same format. Woke to different result. Sometimes the page she remembered writing remained blank. Sometimes notes appeared she had no recollection of making. One entry described a nightmare involving dust flooding a control chamber. She had no such dream. She stopped writing on the 5th night. Museum entry beeped once at the gate. Stamp pressed too hard against her wrist. The gallery smelled of mineral cleaner and drying plaster. Light poured across marble from a skylight older than the city grid. She turned left, walked past a sculpture with a chipped shoulder, past a hallway covered in oil portrait. Her feet found the familiar corridor without effort. The painting hung where it always had, framed in black wood. Canvas stained with thick brush lines. A girl, facing away, hand pressed against glass. A smear of red across her palm. Snow falling outside. Light catching in the reflection. Except the plaque below read a different title. The word refraction replaced with observation. Date of origin unchanged. Artist identical. Catalog number correct. She stepped back. Heart began to skip between beats. Air thickened behind her eyes. She remembered studying that work for hours during academy leave. Quoted the title in her thesis. Referenced it in private note. She remembered it, not as an image but as a feeling. A word that encapsulated something she had once used to explain her own silence. But the name on the plaque no longer matched what her memory held. She reached toward it, finger hovering just short of contact. Pulse jump. Muscles seized near the ribs. A pressure formed across her temples, tight and rising. Legs failed to support the body that no longer trusted the space it occupied. Security found her seated on the tile. Palms flat against the floor. Gaze fixed on a wall that no longer told the truth. When asked what happened, no answer came. Her throat refused language unfamiliar to the timeline she stood in. Sheets tangled at the foot of the bed, damp from sweat not caused by heat. Morning pressed against the windows in a color she couldn't name. It didn't feel like sunlight. It felt like observation. Left leg refused to move at first. Not stiffness. Resistance. As if the limb itself debated its ownership. Fingers traced down the outside of her thigh, skin warm, pulse skipping beneath muscle, breath held. She stopped. A line no wider than a sewing thread stretched diagonally from mid-hip to knee. Pale. Raised. Old, but not ancient. Skin had closed cleanly. No discoloration. No sutures. No bandage. No memory. She pressed into it with her thumb. Pressure sparked something behind her eyes. Pain bloomed, sharp, dry, crystalline. Bone breaking. A crack without warning. A fall. Steel hitting flesh. A scream from someone not present. She collapsed back into the mattress. Hands pulled tight against her chest. Breath short. Chest convulsing. That injury had never happened. There had been no fall. No trauma. No impact. But the pain came shaped and specific. Not imagined. Remembered. Hospital scans returned 2 hours later. Digital records stamped with physician initials she didn't recognize. Femur showed signs of healed fracture. Break occurred at a 40-degree angle, spiral in pattern. Estimated 6 weeks into recovery. No alignment error. No swelling. Diagnosis: post-trauma healing complete. No further treatment recommended. Medical history denied any incident. No report logged. Insurance never billed. Records remained silent. But the bone remembered. Voice messages to Rask went unanswered. The number no longer connected. She drove across city lines to his compound. Door opened after 20 minutes of silence. He didn't speak. He looked down at the leg without question. Said nothing for a while. When he finally did, his voice dropped beneath the tone of comfort. Said she wasn't merging anymore. Said she was already past convergence. Every minute moving forward meant further contamination. Not in data. In identity. Each version layered atop another. Events without anchor. Scars from choices not made. Bodies reacting to causes from elsewhere. He pointed to the side of her face. Cheekbones showed bruising she hadn't noticed. Light green turning gold. A strike from a blunt edge. Not fresh. But not fully faded. She touched it and remembered a fight. An argument near a module door. Gloves torn. Helmets off too early. Someone's fist through a panel. Her jaw catching the edge. No such moment ever occurred. He stepped away without finishing his sentence. Said timelines weren't just narratives. They were currencies. Each version carried cost. Each scar withdrew meaning from a body too thin to hold it all. She left before the lights dimmed again. No record followed her. The street outside no longer matched her childhood memory. The color of the pavement had changed. Announcements arrived without ceremony. A memorandum slipped through internal channels. Subject line dry. Content precise. Budget reopened. Committee reformed. Flight path recalculated. Launch window designated for third quarter. Codename unchanged. Lysithea reinstated. She read the brief 3 times before printing it. The air inside the terminal office didn't move. No conversations. No speculation. Just acknowledgement. Everyone knew this project was dead. Dead not from failure, but from omission. Now it stood upright again, propped by hands unwilling to admit they'd buried it. Application opened to former program candidate. She submitted within the hour. No hesitation. No second draft. No backup. Selection came without fanfare. Name highlighted in green. Badge reissued. Credentials unlocked. Access cleared. Launch crew assigned. 4 members. All new. She said little during orientation. Kept distance during simulation drills. Her answers passed psychometric filters, but internal monitors flagged restlessness in REM cycles. Sleep watched her without warmth. She woke with phrases under her tongue, written in dialects she didn't know she spoke. Some letters reversed themselves. One entry signed in Cyrillic. She didn't correct it. Instructions for re-entry rehearsed across 5 simulations. She corrected the team only once, on a maneuver protocol never shared with this flight model. Debrief leader paused. Asked where she'd learned that sequence. She said nothing. 21 days before departure, she began recording. Not logs. Not messages for others. Notes to herself. Anchors. Not all memories belonged to this timeline. She couldn't trust which ones would remain. So she recorded only what mattered. The smell of copper in the docking bay. The temperature of filtered water. The way gravity tugged her left shoulder tighter than her right. She described the face of a technician who didn't remember meeting her. She detailed a dream where Lysithea exploded in reverse, fragments assembling midair, drawing her body back into pieces it no longer claimed. She burned the recordings to a private drive. Buried it in the wall behind her apartment radiator. Marked the location on a napkin. Folded it 12 times. Wrote nothing on the surface. She memorized that shape. Launch uniforms arrived 7 days before departure. Seams matched her body differently. Arms too tight. Waist fit better. Collar rested against a bruise that hadn't healed. One of the new crew asked why she volunteered. Said it without sarcasm. Pure curiosity. She looked down at the scar on her thigh. Said because no version of her returned clean. Because every path ended at that station. Because if one place held the fracture, returning was the only way to set it. No one asked again. Orbit held without sound. No atmosphere to carry error. The station accepted arrival without protest. Docking clamps responded a fraction early, as if anticipating rather than detecting. Logs recorded touchdown 2 seconds before the event occurred. Chronometers stuttered. Minute hands realigned without cause. Internal clocks disagreed by small margins, none large enough to warrant alert, but too many to ignore. Cabin lights dimmed and brightened by rhythm rather than schedule. No one commented. Systems passed diagnostic. Sleep didn't come. Footsteps in corridor B reported 12 hours before scheduled passage. Thermal imprint confirmed her presence, but suit logs showed her inside containment bay the entire time. Audio logs queued for review displayed timestamps misaligned by month. Her own voice repeated mission procedures she hadn't yet performed. Pronunciation shifted. Cadence altered. One entry described a docking failure that hadn't happened. One spoke a language she didn't know. Another repeated a phrase she recognized but never said aloud. On the 4th orbit, she walked past a console and saw herself reflected in the black glass. Motion lagged behind intention. Head turned, but reflection waited half a second before responding. Eyes misaligned. Lips moved without language. She stood frozen. Console lights blinked to green, confirming environmental lock. The observatory chamber unlocked without requiring clearance. Glass sealed overhead. Starfields aligned outside, motionless. The chamber carried pressure from silence, not vacuum. Inside, the suit's weight became unbearable. Oxygen levels normal. Temperature calibrated. Still the air felt wrong. Fingers moved to the neck ring. Seal disengaged with soft release. Helmet lifted. Air sharp, clean, laced with static. Her breath shortened. Something tugged at her side, familiar, constant, present. She pulled the suit down past the ribs. The scar had widened. From sternum to hip, a single deep curve carved across the body she remembered owning. Not pink. Not fresh. Oh. Settled. Precise. Memory rose without permission. A station breach. Not this one. A chamber decompressed. A beam severed from its housing. She turned too late. Metal tore into her side. Pressure dropped. Suit compromised. Blood filled her gloves. Voice refused to transmit. Emergency seal failed. The last thing she saw was light bending around her shoulder. That version had not returned. But the pain had. And the scar remained. She traced its line with the back of her hand. Flesh recognized the motion. Not foreign. Not dream. A voice spoke from the comms panel. Her own. Saying a name she hadn't spoken since the first mission file was pulled. The panel blinked. Signal showed clear. No source. No repeat. No log of transmission. She didn't move. Didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.